Okay, I'd like to welcome you back to MLevel's Mastery 2019 Customer Virtual Summit, live from Atlanta, the headquarters of MLevel. Our next session is our Customer Success panel. We're joined by Clinton Sorrell, Crystal Toso Corona, just like the beer, I was told, and Chris Weaver. Clinton and Crystal serve on our customer success team. They are truly the minds behind the success of what takes place within our platform. So when you have issues, when you need missions built, whatever it might be, training, they are the ones that truly make this happen for our team and lead that team. Chris Weaver works side by side with me as one of our account strategists. So we truly enjoyed the opportunity to work with our clients and ensure that they're getting the most out of our platform, making sure that the value is there, and really talking about the trials and tribulations that they're going through within learning and development to ensure our platform can help deliver and help with those trials and tribulations. So with that, we're going to go ahead and turn it over, and we're going to go live on camera to this team. Stand.
Hey everyone, thanks for dialing in today. Appreciate you all making the time. I know we've had an action-packed virtual customer summit so far, but hoping to finish on a high note here. So I assume you can guess from the headshots, but I'm Clinton Sorrell, the Director of Customer Operations.
Hi everyone, I'm Crystal Toso Corona, Customer Success Advocate here at MLevel.
Hi, and I'm Chris Weaver, Account Strategist over here with the MLevel team.
So thank you all for making the time today. The idea of this panel is, while some of the other discussions have been a little more structured, right? You've heard from Carl Kopp today, you've heard from Matthew Gill. The idea of this one is to have a little more of a back and forth. So we do have some common customer questions that we'll be answering, but feel free to use the Q&A ability in order to reach out and ask your own questions just about best practices on the platform, just common use cases, really anything that you're curious about. So just to get things started, we're going to go ahead and open up one of our polls here. MLevel does have multiple different activities covering different use cases. A common question that we get is the best one to use, especially from new administrators. We're curious just to hear from our user base itself, right, what your go-to activity is when building on the MLevel platform. So I believe that's up now. Feel free to chime those on in. We'll just give that a few more moments here. But while we go ahead and poll, right, a common question that we get, and I know something that Josh Felix actually discussed during his session, right, or while each of these activities do serve a specific case, they do fall into a few specific umbrellas, right? So we have our knowledge transfer activities such as Knowledge Navigator, video, the ability to link out to additional content with that external link. We have those knowledge reinforcement activities, more commonly referred to as those learning games like Block Party. And then we have the ability to assess that knowledge either in those same activities or with assessment. But looks like that poll is closed up here. We'll go ahead and crack this. And yeah, so the most commonly used activity, just to lead into that, is the assessment activity, which is not too much of a surprise based on the information that we've seen, right? So assessment, one of the nice aspects of assessment is that while those game-based mechanics can be engaging, you also do have to build around them, right? So in Checkpoint, you have your 3 different levels. The learner has to answer 5 questions correctly in each one. And so as a result, you're now guaranteed to be writing 18 total questions, and the learner is going to see 15, where assessment's going to give you a little bit of room. But the one thing that I'll mention to go with assessment as well, that I will say we don't see designers take advantage of as often, is you do have the ability to modify that beyond just the question pool. So for example, in assessment, you can set those gameplay restrictions. You can also just brand that background, right? So if you are looking to have more of a traditional experience with a bit of a gamey feel, we have people kind of put that background with an ice flow, make it similar to Icebreaker, but maybe not ask 30 questions. Maybe they just ask 10, right? You're still racing against the clock, something like that. So just a nice opportunity there to, even if you are using the traditional assessment module, give it a little bit more of a gamey look and feel.
And one of the questions that we actually got from Dan was, can assessment truly be used as the only activity in a mission? Thinking about the presentation that Josh gave regarding the 3 pillars of learning, typically what we see a very effective learning mission to have is going to be a knowledge transfer activity such as Knowledge Navigator and an external link, or maybe you can even craft up a Pathfinder to help transmit some of that knowledge. In conjunction with that, you're going to have one of those reinforcement activities. So we saw that one of the activities that individuals really liked was Icebreaker, right? So being able to kind of leverage Icebreaker, reinforce that content in kind of that short burst style format, and then you follow that up with an assessment. That really gives you that 360-degree view of learning for the end user. And then on the back end with the analytics, that's ultimately going to provide you the ability to fully analyze that user from start to finish. So really get an understanding of, hey, were they able to take in that content, reinforce and anchor that content, and then ultimately pass that content on.
Yeah, so it looks like we have another question here from Amy. So the ability to build questions without a specific question type. So how have you kind of changed your guidance for designers away from Bloom's taxonomy? So I feel like this is actually a good one for each of us to answer, since this is a recent change and we're all kind of hearing different feedback from clients. But at least from my perspective, right, the structure we've approached now, because you do have that flexibility and you aren't having to tie your specific activity to Bloom's taxonomy, is focusing more on those 3 pillars, right, of having that knowledge transfer activity. And then because you can write those question types that are applying to any level of Bloom's taxonomy within any of the questions, rather than having to write one for each of those levels, you can really just make sure, right, I'm reinforcing that knowledge in my block party activity, or I'm reinforcing that knowledge in a fast line, something a little more engaging, where they'll play through that content multiple times and understand it, right? And then if I'm having kind of that evaluation level, or if I'm having them apply that understanding, I just make sure to do that in that final knowledge assessment activity. So most of that guidance now that we're using is sticking to those 3 pillars, because the good news is that even though the activities are no longer tied to Bloom's taxonomy, it's really just because you have more flexibility in the types of content that you're using in each one, rather than not still being able to use that as a general guideline for constructing your learning.
And I think in conjunction with that, what that really kind of tends to do is it shifts your focus away from picking an activity based on Bloom's taxonomy, and it shifts it more over to, hey, what are the learning objectives for my end user? So let's say, for example, I need to train up some call center reps that need to understand some banking acronyms, for example, right? In a call center space, you're typically going to have to recall that information very quickly. So I'm going to want to use a game that has maybe some time mechanics, such as Icebreaker, Short Fuse, or maybe even Assessment. And then the question types I'm going to use there are going to be probably a little bit more aided towards that quick recall. So maybe I'm going to focus a little bit more on true or false. Maybe I'm going to focus a little bit more on some multiple choice that maybe only have 2 answer options.
And I think going with the theme of this event, for those of you that were on earlier, where Carl Kapp talked about the learner experience, just keeping that learner kind of at the forefront. What do they want to see? What do they want to experience? And now that you have the flexibility to use any activity with any question type, you can really take advantage of the MLevel platform by really picking and choosing something that's going to resonate well with your audience.
Oh, we got another one here. So the best way to build a complex Pathfinder. Crystal, you want to take that one?
I think, yeah, I'm just going to go for it. But the best way to build a complex Pathfinder definitely is storyboard it out. Before you get into the platform, kind of have a general idea and kind of a general flow of how you want the activity to move through, and how the learner should go through that path. I've seen a lot of times where someone will start a Pathfinder and kind of realize halfway that they do want some branching logic within that activity, and then now trying to rework it to make it fit that structure can become a little problematic and a little kind of confusing, since they're iterating from their original idea. So I think just being a little bit more purposeful and intentional, storyboarding that out is really going to help.
And I feel like to add on there too, and I feel like people are going to get tired of hearing me talk about learning objectives, right? But it really comes all the way back, right, to the learning objectives. And ultimately, what is that experience that we want from the end user? So is it something that we want them to be prescribed down a very linear path? Like, okay, well, that's going to be a linear scenario, right? Kind of straight dead ahead. Or is it something where it needs to be a little bit more exploratory for the end user? Okay, then let's put them down that branching path as well.
All right, so yeah, we're going to go ahead and fire up our next poll here. So that should be coming up shortly, right? So a common thing that we also receive questions about is the question input, kind of which one to use. So manual questions or the content grid. Just as a refresher to maybe some people newer to the platform, right? The content grid is where you're arranging that information in the table using your topics, those different learning objectives, those attributes, in order to put the information together and create templates. And then manual questions is what it sounds like, right? You're putting those in one at a time. So we'll just give a few more moments for that poll to fill out here. Yeah, we should have. It's good to know. Yeah, and so manual questions is used more often. Right, this is kind of a nice lead in. So we see each tool kind of has its different uses, right? So with manual questions, a lot of the times what you'll see are, right, you're either having these questions reviewed by legal or reviewed by a subject matter expert, and they're already coming to you pre-written. You'll also see just a greater amount of flexibility in terms of the ability to edit each specific question. But when you're actually building a content grid from scratch, right, you're creating new information or you're working with the subject matter expert from the ground up, there are some advantages there as well. Any of you guys want to weigh in on?
So I would say, at least kind of from my perspective, kind of coming up in, MLevel, a couple of years back, right, everything was very much so focused around the content grid. I'm old school, right? So I really like the content grid, but I think it also really depends upon the types of content that you have. So one of the things that the content grid performs very well on is going to be product information, right? So features, functionalities, and so forth, right? You can create a ton of great questions very quickly that allows for you to create almost any game activity within the platform within, maybe an hour of work. Whereas if your content is maybe a little bit more lengthier, yeah, you probably want to go ahead with those manual questions, especially if legal has to go through a review.
Well, seeing that we have a question from Carol, we're going to move on to that one. It's going to say, how can we get new designers that have joined our team trained on the platform? That one's pretty simple. You will reach out to us. So you should reach out to either your account strategist or your customer success advocate, and we'll be happy to send the information over to set up that new designer to get them trained up on our platform, and they'll probably be with either myself or Clinton. So yeah, pretty easy, pretty straightforward there.
Yeah. And then it looks like we also have a question from Anne, kind of referring back to the content grid, saying, aren't they more efficient during that build process? So I would agree 100% with you. You can certainly create a ton of great questions off of the content grid. But again, it really comes down to what is that base content that you're working with, right? So is it more feature, functionality, product-driven information, maybe something that's going out to a sales team? Content grid makes a ton of sense. Whereas, if it's something maybe a little bit more lengthier, you may want to go ahead with those manual questions, especially if your legal team's going to have to go through and review that information.
Yeah, just to echo that, right, the content grid is a tool, right? So with all tools, right, there are certain use cases where you're going to use a screwdriver. There are certain use cases where you're going to use a hammer. The content grid is very powerful for quickly generating that content, but also for making sure that you're looking at your information from that analytical perspective to make sure you're identifying those knowledge gaps, to make sure that you're addressing all of those key learning objectives when pulling things together for your learner, right? But if you do have something where those questions are already pre-written, manual questions may be the way to go there. We just still strongly advise that you tag those questions to make sure you're identifying those knowledge gaps. It does take a little more time than using that grid, but it is going to make sure you're still getting the full value of MLevel when you're building those missions with the ability to follow up. But it looks like we have another question here, and that's around the suggestions for, so I guess completion requirements is the best way to put it. So what do you suggest for percentages for being awarded the MLevel badge? So either you want to take this one.
So from my perspective, right, I would argue and say that anywhere between 95 to 100%, right? We need to make sure that these individuals truly understand the information that's being presented, before them. We're putting together this training because it's important information that they need to understand. So simply going ahead and saying, okay, hey, you only need to know 75%, you only need to know 80%, 85%. As Josh Felix would say, right, what about that other 20%, right? What about that other 15%? That could be the difference in, revenue. That could be the difference in potentially, some type of lawsuit, what have you. So it's extremely important that these individuals truly understand all the information that's being put into the platform.
And coming off of that, if you are going in and tagging your questions, when you drill through the knowledge to identify any knowledge gaps, you'll start to see that there might be some trend lines across your group, across your classroom. And if you're talking about 15 to 20% of information that's being missed across an entire group, I mean, I just see the potential for some refresher training there. Definitely.
Yeah, and the other thing, and it's kind of a slightly different perspective to look at it from, but first of all, in MLevel, our opinion is we hard code it to 95%. So I know as just kind of a company, we skew towards the higher side, but part of the reason for that too, right, is the average MLevel activity play takes anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes, and the average MLevel mission contains 1 to 4 activities, right? And even if you're a little on the longer side of that, you're not looking at that long of a window, right? Where in the past, or when you're using other tools, right, you're asking the person to go through an hour of content or 2 hours of content. But when they're playing these micro learning activities, I think it's also more acceptable to the learner to hold them to that higher standard, right? If you don't understand that information, take the extra minute, take the extra 2 minutes to make sure you're really going through that content and proving you know and understand all of it.
Got a question in. Do you have to tag questions?
And then it looks like it says, to go deeper, does it have to be both tags or just one?
Yeah, so it does, the hard-coded reason is it does have to be both tags. So what's going on there when you're writing those questions is that first tag is going to be your topic, tends to be a broader subject. For example, where Chris was talking about products, a common thing that we'll see is there will maybe be one topic per product, right? So you're talking about the iPhone, the Google Pixel, and the Galaxy. So you might have a topic for each of those, but then that second tag is what we call the item in MLevel. So that's going to be more specific, right? Focusing on the pricing for each of those models, the benefits, maybe even something as specific as battery life. And so by tagging both of those, you're able to see that understanding at that higher level, right? Is there just one product that learners understand better than another? And then by having that second tag, you're able to dive in deeper and see if there really is, right, that extra 20% what they're struggling with. But this is one point where also just take a moment to mention, right, that while those topics can be different, those second tags can be consistent. So sticking to that product example, right, for all 3 of those products, you can have that more specific item tag of pricing, or you can have that more specific item tag of benefits. And so what that'll let you see as an administrator, right, is maybe they average kind of an 80% for each of the devices. But when you're specifically focusing on pricing, they're having a lower mastery percentage. So the ability to have both of those tags lets you get a little more flexible, lets you see some more of those knowledge intersections as an administrator or as someone looking at that information after the mission's gone live.
Yeah, so the short answer, no, you don't have to tag your questions. However, with all of those items that Clinton mentioned, it's almost like, why wouldn't you, especially if you're trying to find those pieces of data or trying to get that type of insight into your group. full time.
Yeah, so here focusing on that content again, right? Which question type do you find yourself using the most? Some of these have come live in MLevel more recently than others, especially across all the activities with the question manager release. But yeah, we'll just take a moment to go ahead and fill that information out.
Now, if I was to go in and say, okay, what's my kind of favorite question type, I'd probably have to go with those image-based hotspots. I think that's a number one, a very cool use case and a great way to kind of leverage the assessment activity to create some very quick and easy platform training or kind of system software training and so forth. So that ability to order your questions in assessment, you can go ahead, kind of order everything. So like someone's actually going through that system. So here you can go ahead and easily get an understanding for, hey, what do they not know from a system navigation standpoint, and what materials can we do to kind of help them out?
Well, it looks like the public has spoken and they do not agree with you.
No, that's okay.
Number one answer, multiple choice.
Yeah, so I'd say, yeah, that's certainly the most common question type 2 across all the MLevel activities in the past, although with the question manager deployment, that multiple choices, it almost used to be required before, right? If you were doing, I'd say maybe 50% of the activities, or now you are going to have that greater degree of flexibility. Like Chris was saying, though, the image hotspot allows you to open up to some use cases that you can't really do with those text-based questions, right? So the ability to practice a simulation in a safe environment or in a test environment, immediately provide that feedback, but also to see that data on if there are certain steps that learners just don't understand.
And I think another thing to think about there too is the learner experience, right? So if you're kind of just going in and creating a bunch of multiple choice questions and kind of pushing it out, it could seem as though that it's a very repetitive experience from the end user. So a good way to kind of increase that learner engagement is to go ahead and maybe mix in some of those different question types, right? So maybe an image-based question, maybe some true or false here and there, a multiple correct, and so forth, right? To kind of give them a different look and a different feel of that information across their learning experience.
And I just want to like touch on that because it reminded me of what one of the speakers mentioned earlier, where you almost have to inject yourself into that learner seat. How are they going to be exposed to that information on the job? Mm-hmm. So if you're just asking a ton of multiple choice questions, I mean, if I'm in a client facing role like I am now, I won't be asked things probably posed as a multiple choice. I'll need to answer things quickly. So I think presenting that information in a way that's relevant to them, and the fact that MLevel gives you the flexibility to ask it in a variety of ways is going to be super helpful. So we do have a question that came in while one of y'all was talking. Do you build missions for clients, and how quick can we do it?
So the answer is yes. So we do offer mission building as a service. I think the reason we all hesitated for the second part, right, is, I mean, in theory, you could build an MLevel activity with 15 questions, put some branding on it, and publish it in an hour, right? But that's just kind of writing. You've only put an hour of thought into that learning program. So part of what goes into that whole mission building process for us, especially as a group of people coming from the outside looking in, right, a third party vendor working with our clients, is we do spend a good portion of that time scoping that out, thinking of how to use each of those activities, how to use each of those tools. So typically when we're going through that project, it'll usually even be, I'd say, a week before we're coming back to the client with the content. So we'll have a kickoff call. They'll send us that raw information, or we'll review what they're trying to do. And then we're going to take at least kind of 3 to 4 business days before we come back with that original set of questions or with that content grid, depending on which tool we're using there, to review that information. Now from there, I'd say the content is maybe 70% of the job, right? Making sure that's right. Once we're in the platform, especially as people who are there every day, we tend to build those activities out and brand them fairly quickly. But even though that time in the platform is small, from a kind of our perspective relative to most, we're still taking a good portion of time planning that out.
Yeah, before I approach any mission build service for any of the clients, there's a ton of discovery conversations that we're going through, especially for those of you that work in industries that that are a little bit more specific, or where certain words have to say certain things. For shout out to those of you in the biopharma space or any of the medical equipment space, anything like that, where it has to be super specific. We're in there asking those questions. Can we say this? Can we say that? Does this make sense? Or even just asking questions for our own clarity. I might have a question about the content. Well, do your learners have that same question, or is this something that is universally known? And then after all that, where I do have the content, I kind of have an idea of the direction I'm heading, and we have the objectives laid out. I'm going back, but I always storyboard it out. I kind of have an idea of how I want it to look and how I want it to present before I actually put it into the platform. I think it's just an easier way, especially to set expectations with clients so that they know what they're going to receive before I even send it out.
Perfect. It looks like we got a question from Ron. What would you each say is the first step in building a successful mission? So this is kind of another layup, Ron, so I appreciate that. But this goes back to learning objectives, right? So before you even get into the platform, right? Before you even start thinking about what questions I need to be asking and so forth, right? It really needs to all start with, why are we building this training, right? Why are we building this training, and what are we looking to measure? Those kind of two elements are really going to be the guiding light for the overall content you're creating, the questions you're asking, the game activities you're using, and so forth.
Want me to go next?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I'd say my first step, right, is after reading the content, so that seems like the cheating answer, right, is I do try to look at it as injecting myself into that learner experience, right? So if we're building something for a pharmaceutical rep, to piggyback off of Crystal's example, right? Typically, I'm looking from that as a seller from the perspective of, what's my doctor going to ask me, or what would I really need to know in order to make sure I'm facilitating those meaningful conversations and having those meaningful interactions. So typically, I'll write that out as kind of my own notes off to the side, where I try to pretend I'm someone who's really ingesting that content for a real world application. So once I have that set, that's what I'll go ahead and build my content grid off of, or that's what I'll go ahead and choose those activities off of to determine where I'm applying that shorter set of information, where if I were that real world learner, those would be my key takeaways, or those would be where I'd see that application in my day-to-day role.
And I think for me, first step, and this kind of came about recently actually, is really knowing your participants, knowing your audience. It recently happened where I built a mission out, and we used a couple of activities that didn't include any time-based mechanics. And the client came back to me and said, you know what, the participants, they're busy, they're going to be accessing on their mobile device. They really don't have time to go to and from meeting with clients to take training traditionally. Can we have something that's quicker? So instead of 2 activities, we actually went down to 1 that included all of the question bases, and then also had a time factor so that their users weren't kind of just sitting and taking an activity kind of at their leisure, but they're moving through the content quickly.
Oh, looks like we're gonna bring it home with another poll here. So yeah, delivery method for MLevel missions, right? So MLevel is a cloud-based platform, but there are various tools for delivering those activities. All right, so MLevel Web is our HTML-based version that's browser agnostic, that can be accessed on a thin client. And then we do have the ability to access through the mobile app for those users on the go, going from meeting to meeting. And then we do have play.mlevel.com, the original web browser version of that platform. So we'll just give it a moment to fill in here. So I'd say, right, MLevel Web, the overwhelming winner here, although these display as well, so you're able to see that. I wouldn't say that's too much of a surprise based on the usage data that we're able to see on our end, right? But one of the key focuses of MLevel Web is that flexibility, right? So we're actually constantly working to make that something that a learner can access now on a tablet as well, as opposed to having to use the app, right, that a contact center employee can access on that thin client. And then one of the good pieces of news that I think Whitney already revealed as well is that MLevel web solution is going to continue to be more flexible from a content standpoint in terms of number of activities, things like that.
We do have a question that came through. This one's going to be fun. Going back to what Carl said related to don't turn a 1 hour piece of training into a 5-minute micro learning session. How do we go about handling that?
So from my perspective, it all starts with the content design kind of element, right? And kind of taking a look at that 1 hour training and seeing, okay, are there logical areas where we can kind of chop that up, right? So kind of taking maybe it in a first half, and then maybe we're going to do a very quick, game-based assessment around it. We can go ahead, we can send out those deep links so they're accessing it right at the point of need. They go in, they take that quick training, and then they're back out. Then, maybe a day later, 2 weeks later, whatever time frame we decide on, we can then go ahead, maybe we send out another assessment. So we kind of break it down into those bite-sized chunks. So maybe it is an hour's worth of content across a period of time, but it's not just, hey, we're going to sit down and do a 1 hour training right here, right now.
I like that idea. So one thing that I spoke to Chris about recently was creating a learning calendar in your space. And if you have something like that where you do have these longer sessions, but you're trying to incorporate micro learning, is create kind of a cadence for your training when your users will interact with that content, and also take the opportunity to introduce those concepts, even if it's the same thing or similar or parallel, but in different ways, so that it's a different experience each time and your audience is being tested on it and assessed on it in a variety of ways.
And yeah, so looks like we have another question here, but just quickly, right, one of the other things that you can use MLevel for is, is that blended learning solution. So maybe you're not entirely replacing that training time with an MLevel mission, but you're using it more effectively, right? So we have one client that will lead with an MLevel mission. The idea is they go through that, they understand those key terms before, and then they're using that time in an online webinar to focus on more of those application discussions or some of those things that you can't necessarily cover within that micro-learning module. Then we've got a follow-up here, right? So with the forgetting curve in mind, what do you recommend for reinforcement mission frequency?
So myself, I kind of look at it as, I look at it typically in 2-week intervals. So oftentimes, doing a larger training on the front end, and then reinforcing that maybe with some supplemental game activities periodically throughout, week 2, week 4, week 6, week 8. I do know of some other customers that are doing more of a 30, 60, 90, 120 day approach. It really comes down to, one, the bandwidth of your team, right? So when will they be able to kind of engage and so forth? And 2, really just looking at the material that you're looking for them to absorb.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to depend on your use case and on your situation. For those of you that are truly sticking to that micro learning setup where you are delivering just these bursts of information, then yeah, definitely have those higher frequencies. But for those of you that are working with these larger things, with these kind of these larger concepts or larger things that you're going on, or have kind of a more robust content structure, it may make sense to move that to a 30, 60, or 90-day window. We do have some questions in.
So this is actually some kind of a use case here, right? So one recommendation from a client of ours. So appreciate that, Jessica. Right, so the schedule that they use is weekly for that first month, and then you extend that time as it goes. One of the reasons that I like that as well is we've had some clients wait a little bit longer for that first one, and even not necessarily from a remembering the material perspective, but just from an engagement perspective, I believe it's just helpful to have one a little bit earlier to make sure that the learners are still, that you're sending a message of, hey, this is a thing we're going to keep working on, right? Keeping them engaged. So if you do wait a month or 2 months after that initial session, some of that momentum's worn off a bit, right? This is that thing they did a while ago, and maybe it'll move its way down the to-do list and maybe fall off without them taking care of it. But if you are sending that follow-up mission a week after, 2 weeks after, that's still fresh in their mind. It's going to set that pattern of them engaging with that material and actually going through it instead of necessarily following off. But from Sunil here, so can I create a mission from my phone? In theory, yes. So you can access the studio from your phone. Having actually done it, my advice would be to access from a laptop instead. The main reason is, right, you are fitting all that content onto a much smaller screen. So you have to write that question and then you scroll down and write each of your answers there. So it tends to be fairly time consuming just from the aspect of getting all that content in kind of one window and writing it all out. So yes, you could access the studio from there, but my advice would be to wait until you're on a computer. We got one more poll here. So the best part about using MLevel. It's a nice one. So yeah, we'll just give it a few more moments here, but kind of any final notes, I guess, too, before we go into the results from this one, any key takeaways?
I think just going back to Sunil's comment, one of the things that you could do and that I've done in the past is assign a mission out, right, via mobile device. I am in full agreement with you, right? Kind of going in and creating questions and so forth. Probably very difficult on a mobile device, right? Just kind of due to your screen size there. But just being able to kind of go in, hey, I need to go ahead and assign this out to a new group. Maybe I'm traveling or so forth, right? That would probably be a very easy use case.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, so we have our results here, and this one's close, which I guess we wrote some good answers for this one, right? But so the no code required, taking the cake, is something that I know I appreciate every single day, but the engagement and quick deployment closely behind, right? So I do think these all kind of tie together, right? Even those activity templates are the reason that no code is required. But just from a building perspective, one thing I'd say to keep in mind when you're using those is always feel free to reach out to us for help, right? Whether it's as simple as asking which one is kind of recommended to, I know we'll often get questions around branding capabilities, the ability to change those color codes. And so we're always more than happy to take a look at your mission, provide that advice, and go from there.
Yeah, we're always around to help. And then for those of you that are looking at, maybe you caught something from this session that you want to implement or want to go kind of a further deep dive, definitely set up time with either your account strategist or one of us. We're always happy to help, and we always love to talk to see what you're up to.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate your time today.